This is Audible.
Harper Audio presents The Harlequin Tea Set by Agatha Christie, performed by Hugh Fraser.
The Harlequin Tea Set. Mr. Satterthwaite clucked twice in vexation. Whether right in his assumption or not, he was more and more convinced that cars nowadays broke down far more frequently than they used to do. The only cars he trusted were old friends who had survived the test of time. They had their little idiosyncrasies, but you knew about those, provided for them, fulfilled their wants before the demand became too acute. But new cars, full of new gadgets, different kinds of windows, an instrument panel newly and differently arranged, handsome in its glistening wood, but being unfamiliar, your groping hand hovered uneasily over fog lights, windscreen wipers, the choke, etc. All these things with knobs in a place you didn't expect them. And when your gleaming new purchase failed in performance, your local garage uttered the intensely irritating words, "Teething troubles. Splendid car, sir. These roadsters, superbos. All the latest accessories, but bound to have their teething troubles, you know." Just as though a car were a baby. But Mr. Satterthwaite, being now of an advanced age, was strongly of the opinion that a new car ought to be fully adult, tested, inspected, and its teething troubles already dealt with before it came into its purchaser's possession. Mr. Satterthwaite was on his way to pay a weekend visit to friends in the country. His new car had already, on the way from London, given certain symptoms of discomfort, and was now drawn up in a garage, waiting for the diagnosis. Mr. Satterthwaite was waiting to find out how long it would take before he could resume progress towards his destination. His chauffeur was in consultation with the mechanic. Mr. Satterthwaite sat striving for patience. He had assured his hosts on the telephone the night before that he would be arriving in good time for tea. He would reach Doverton Kingsbourne, he assured them, well before 4 o'clock. He clucked again in irritation, and tried to turn his thoughts to something pleasant. It was no good sitting here in a state of acute irritation, frequently consulting his wristwatch, clucking once more, and giving, he had to realize, a very good imitation of a hen, pleased with its prowess in laying an egg. Yes, something pleasant. Yes. Now, hadn't there been something he had noticed as they were driving along? Not very long ago. Something that he had seen through the window, which had pleased and excited him. But before he had had time to think about it, the car's misbehavior had become more pronounced, and a rapid visit to the nearest service station had been inevitable. What was it that he had seen? On the left? No, on the right. Yes, on the right, as they drove slowly through the village street. Next door to a post office. Yes, he was quite sure of that. Next door to a post office, because the sight of the post office had given him the idea of telephoning to the Addisons to break the news that he might be slightly late in his arrival. The post office. A village post office. And next to it, yes, definitely next to it, next door, or if not next door, the door after, something that had stirred old memories, and he had wanted, yes, just what was it he had wanted? Oh, dear. It would come to him presently. It was mixed up with a colour, several colours. Yes, a colour or colours. or a word. Some definite word that had stirred memories, thoughts, pleasures gone by, excitement, recalling something that had been vivid and alive, something which he himself had not only seen, but observed. No, he had done more. He had taken part. Taken part in what? And why? And where? All sorts of places. The answer came quickly at the last thought. All sorts of places. On an island, in Corsica, at Monte Carlo watching the croupier, spinning his roulette wheel, a house in the country, all sorts of places. And he had been there. And someone else. Yes, someone else. It all tied up with that. He was getting there at last. If he could just... He was interrupted at that moment by the chauffeur coming to the window with the garage mechanic in tow behind him. "Won't be long now, sir," the chauffeur assured Mr. Satterthwaite cheerfully. "Matter of 10 minutes or so. Not more." "Nothing seriously wrong," said the mechanic in a low, hoarse country voice. "Teething troubles, as you might say." Mr. Satterthwaite did not cluck this time. He gnashed his own teeth. A phrase he had often read in books, and which in old age he seemed to have got into the habit of doing himself, due perhaps to the slight looseness of his upper plate. Really, teething trouble, toothache, teeth gnashing, false teeth, one's whole life centred, he thought, about teeth. "Dover and Kingsbourne's only a few miles away," said the chauffeur, "and they've a taxi here. You could go on in that, sir, and I'll bring the car up later as soon as it's fixed." "No," said Mr. Satterthwaite. He said the word explosively, and both the chauffeur and the mechanic looked startled. Mr. Satterthwaite's eyes were sparkling. His voice was clear and decisive. Memory had come to him. "I propose," he said, "to walk along the road we have just come by. When the car is ready, you will pick me up there. The Harlequin Cafe, I think it's called." "It's not very much of a place, sir," the mechanic advised. "That is where I shall be," said Mr. Satterthwaite, speaking with a kind of regal autocracy. He walked off briskly. The two men stared after him. "Don't know what's got into him," said the chauffeur. "Never seen him like that before." The village of Kingsbourne Ducas did not live up to the old-world grandeur of its name. It was a smallish village consisting of one street, a few houses, shops that were dotted rather unevenly, sometimes betraying the fact that they were houses which had been turned into shops, or that they were shops which now existed as houses, without any industrial intentions. It was not particularly old world or beautiful. It was just simple and rather unobtrusive. Perhaps that was why, thought Mr. Satterthwaite, that a dash of brilliant colour had caught his eye. Ah, here he was at the post office. The post office was a simply functioning post office, with a pillar box outside, a display of some newspapers and some postcards, and surely next to it, yes, there was the sign up above, the Harlequin Cafe. A sudden qualm struck Mr. Satterthwaite. Really, he was getting too old. He had fancies. Why should that one word stir his heart? The Harlequin Cafe. The mechanic at the service station had been quite right. It did not look like a place in which one would really be tempted to have a meal. A snack, perhaps. A morning coffee. Then why? But he suddenly realized why. Because the cafe, or perhaps one could better put it as the house that sheltered the cafe, was in two portions. One side of it had small tables with chairs round them, arranged ready for patrons who came here to eat. But the other side was a shop that sold china. It was not an antique shop. It had no little shelves of glass vases or mugs. It was a shop that sold modern goods, and the show window that gave on the street was at the present moment housing every shade of the rainbow. A tea set of largish cups and saucers, each one of a different colour: blue, red, yellow, green, pink, purple. Really, Mr. Satterthwaite thought, a wonderful show of colour. No wonder it had struck his eye as the car had passed slowly beside the pavement, looking ahead for any sign of a garage or a service station. It was labelled with a large card as a Harlequin Tea Set. It was the word Harlequin, of course, which had remained fixed in Mr. Satterthwaite's mind, although just far enough back in his mind so that it had been difficult to recall it. The gay colours, the Harlequin colours, and he had thought, wondered, had the absurd but exciting idea that in some way here was a call to him specially. Here, perhaps eating a meal or purchasing cups and saucers, might be his own old friend, Mr. Harley Quinn. How many years was it since he had last seen Mr. Quinn? A large number of years. Was it the day he had seen Mr. Quinn walking away from him down a country lane? Lover's Lane, they had called it. He had always expected to see Mr. Quinn again, once a year at least, possibly twice a year. But no, that had not happened. And so today he had had the wonderful and surprising idea that here, in the village of Kingsbourne Ducis, he might once again find Mr. Harley Quinn. "Absurd of me," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "Quite absurd of me. Really, the ideas one has as one gets old."